Sure. Jeff Tittel, Director, New Jersey Sierra Club. And I just wanted to start out and say that when it comes to climate change, the scientists got it wrong. They completely blew it. What we thought was going to happen 20 or 30 years from now is happening today.
Yeah.
The goals that we set 10 and 15 years ago are no longer viable. Because we have a climate emergency, and you can see it with California on fire. I mean, in the West, an area bigger than New Jersey has burnt this year alone. We can see it in the tropical storms, but more importantly, we see it right here in New Jersey every day. And, you know, when you look and you see my picture, you know, I have my two grandkids. They're born in 2020. And so I like to look at the world as where it's going to be when they're 30 years old, 50 years old, 80 years old, and what kind of world will they have? And so I just want to give you some numbers about New Jersey, because I think it's critical that New Jersey is the second fastest rising state when it comes to climate change in the nation. We will see by the time my grandkids are 80 years old, the sea level around New Jersey rising by 8.8 feet. And that's actually a conservative estimate, according to Rutgers University. Vulnerable places in the state, like Newark Airport, the Jersey Shore, will see chronic flooding starting now, because we have sunny day flooding in many of the parts of New Jersey. Every time there's a full moon, you've got streets going underwater, and cars down along Barnegat Bay or in Atlantic City have to be moved, sometimes now blocks. New Jersey is the second in the nation for building homes in the most vulnerable areas for flooding from sea level rise and storm surges. Only Florida beats us. And so one of the problems we have is that we need to change and update what we do in New Jersey. You can go on to the next slide. They're talking about along our coast, where we have a football field a year of coastal wetlands disappearing. We're seeing last summer and now this summer, these harmful algae blooms affecting our lakes. Last summer, over 50 lakes had to be closed. This year it was close, it was 40. It was a little cooler spring in May, and that sort of saved us a little bit. But those are also not just lakes, they're also reservoirs. 5 reservoirs in New Jersey also saw serious outbreaks, because what's happening is, as the temperature is getting warmer, we're getting more rainfall and more stormwater runoff, and it's a combination of nutrients from not managing stormwater and the water temperatures in our waterways that are causing these algae blooms to go out of control. And it's happening along the shore too. Last year we had a serious problem with clinging jellyfish, and this year we had sea lice, which is something we had down in Cape May and Ocean City, which is something you never see north of South Carolina, but yet we had it here this year. We have bays where jellyfish, you can't even start swimming, you know, even early in the summer in May and June now. And so we're seeing these impacts. But what's also happening is we're seeing saltwater intrusion along our coast, destroying coastal wetlands, also getting into our wells. There are wetlands that used to be, if you go down to, again, Barnegat Bay, you'll see ghost forests. They used to be actually coastal forested wetlands. They're all dead now because the water has turned brackish. We have wells along the Jersey Shore and in Cumberland and Salem counties that have turned to saltwater, and they either have to be closed or, in the case of Cape May, they had to build a desalination plant. So those things are happening. We're the second largest state in damages from flooding, because it's not just coastal. We've had inland flooding from everything from Hurricane Floyd and, you know, Sandy and Irene, where we have areas that have flooded, like for instance, the Delaware River had 3 major floods of a 75 or 100-year flood happen in 3 years in a row. What was a 100-year flood is happening in some places every 10 years, in some places less. What was a 500-year flood is now really the 100-year storm, and we have to, you know, keep up on it. I can go to the next slide. So the reason I wanted to give you those inputs is because no matter what the governor says, about climate change and offshore wind, solar, or plug-in cars, we will never get there unless we stop building fossil fuel infrastructure. The Sierra Club and Delaware Riverkeeper are a part of a coalition of about 100 groups called Empower New Jersey. And their first priority is to ask the governor for a moratorium on fossil fuels. And the reason, quite simply, is that, Greta Thunberg has said that that our planet's on fire and our house is on fire. Well, if a house is on fire, the first thing the fire department does when they show up when a house is on fire is shut off the gas. And if we don't shut off the gas in the state, we're never going to get to those goals, and climate damage is going to continue to get worse. And so we've been working to try to get the governor to put a moratorium on fossil fuels. He has the legal authority. We had a group of lawyers put together a paper for him on his authority, but yet they keep saying they don't have the authority, just like we keep telling them they need to regulate CO2. New Jersey is one of the only states that does not regulate carbon dioxide. We do not have any state standards, and we need to have them. And yet, since 2005, the state of New Jersey has had the ability to do it. We've also, since then, had the ability to regulate methane, which they're not even talking about doing yet. And so that's why it's so important for us to have this moratorium. And I'll put it this way. Under RGGI, we're supposed to reduce greenhouse gases in the electrical sector by 30%. If the different power plant projects that are being proposed in New Jersey get built, we'll be increasing CO2 by 30% instead of reducing it. That's the direct opposite of what we need to do. It's unconscionable, but yet there are projects out there that are being proposed right now. One of them last year we ended up stopping was the North Brunswick generating station. It was because 50 plus towns came out against it, and a lot of legislators, and everywhere the governor went, Empower New Jersey with Sierra Club members and others, kept bugging the governor and asking him questions at town halls or protesting him. And finally, I think he kind of gave up and came out against it. He also came out against it because we were also fighting the air permits. I don't think the plant would have gotten them. But that's, why we really need to, get this moratorium in place, because we won't be able to get all that offshore wind in place that we need unless we stop with natural gas power plants. Because the point is that if they get built first or get permitted first, we'll never get the wind because the market is not going to handle that much electricity. So unless the governor puts a moratorium in place, it's a race between the fossil fuel plants and offshore wind. And I think the fossil fuel plants will win. And that's, I think, a serious problem. You can go to the next slide. So at the same time, the governor is calling out for reductions in greenhouse gases and electrifying our transportation sector. He also, New Jersey Department of Traffic, or DOT, came out with a capital plan that's going to spend $16 billion over the next 15 years to widen 400 miles of roadway in the state of New Jersey. It will increase car lane capacity by close to 1 million cars, and will add a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases. And so I'll put it, try to do it this way. The governor, and by the way, the number of 330 electric vehicles by 2025 was the goal we set in 2007. And we can go well beyond that. California is going to 100% electric cars by 2035. We should think about what California is doing, because in 2035, we would be less than a third. But 330,000 cars is 5% of our vehicles. We have 6.5 million vehicles in the state, so it'd be about 5%. The increased traffic based on the highway widenings would blow that away by quite a bit. The other state project that has a major concern for us is the Meadowlands power plant, what's called Transit Grid. Transit Grid is a proposal by New Jersey Transit, the people who can't run our trains on time, to build a 140 megawatt power plant. And the purpose originally was only to run a microgrid when the grid went down. And instead, they want to use it to run 24/7 to sell power into the grid. It would be the 12th largest power plant in the state and would produce over 650,000 metric tons of gas a year, of CO2 a year. And it's in the middle of an environmental justice community. If the governor really cares about environmental justice, when he signed the environmental justice bill, he cares about clean energy, if he cares about reducing greenhouse gases, how can the state of New Jersey put $400 million of public money into building this when there's a much better alternative that we've been working on and trying to get the state of New Jersey to listen, which is very simply to instead power the microgrid with a combination of solar panels, battery storage, and fuel cells for backup. And you can do it cheaper, you can do it better. The state could actually make money selling that power back into the grid, and we would be able to power electric trains with renewable energy and battery storage. And in fact, the grid itself is actually cleaner than this power plant, because the grid in New Jersey is about 30% nuclear and close to 20% renewable, while that power plant is 100% fossil fuel and would produce actually more power than just buying power from the grid. And that's why it makes absolutely no sense. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to try to get through these. Another issue has come up in one of the areas that we've been involved in for a long time is the Highlands. We spent a lot of time passing the Highlands Act, and on the banks almost of a C1 stream, Hewitt Brook, right by the Monksville Reservoir. And by the way, that picture you see is actually the Monksville Reservoir, and the power plant, you would actually, that compressor station would be right in that photograph, and that's one of the reasons why it's there. That's from up on Board Mountain in Ringwood. And it would put not only air pollution, but it's the runoff from this compressor station for the pipeline. And the purpose of this pipeline is to bring gas through New Jersey from Pennsylvania to bring it to New York, into Westchester County, to make up for the work that everybody did here in the Middlesex Sierra Club, Raritan Valley Group, and the other people in stopping the Nessie pipeline that was going to cut through Raritan Bay. So even though we stopped the Nessie pipeline because of Governor Cuomo denied their permits in New York and then New Jersey followed, this would bring that same gas that we just blocked into New York through building this massive compressor station. It'd be 47 acres, massive industrial facility with chromium and benzene and all kinds of hydrocarbons as runoff. And if there's an accident or a spill there, it would go directly into the Monksville Reservoir, jeopardizing our water supply. And so that's one of the critical projects that the governor has to stop. Next, please. The other way. Thanks. The Southern Reliability Link is a pipeline the Sierra Club's been fighting now for 5 years. We've asked the governor to put a stay on it while we're in court. We had won our court case 2 years ago. It was remanded back to the Pinelands Commission for disposition. They chose to go ahead and reapprove it. We sued on that, and we're waiting to go into court at the appellate division. And we've asked for a stay so that we can have our day in court, because we think we're going to win, that this pipeline violates the comprehensive management plan of the Pinelands. But more importantly, they've been building it. And in the construction of this pipeline, we believe there are documented 9 what are called incidental returns, which is a fancy way of saying illegal discharges into groundwater, into streams, into wetlands. And one of those discharges actually caused a blowout that cracked the foundation on a person's house, and now that house has been condemned. There are 10 other instances that we have documented that have not been completely verified by DEP as violations, but we have found leakage and what's called bentonite in streams, and we found a sinkhole next to a road. And the point is that the governor not only should give us a day in court, but they should stop doing this Hdd drilling, which is where they, it's hazardous directional drilling, I call it, but what it does is you're basically forcing water and the slurry under high pressure sort of like fracking, to drill a tunnel under a stream or wetland or road. And under that pressure, you can have the drill get stuck. You can have these kinds of blowouts. And so it shouldn't even be allowed as a methodology for drilling, especially in an area with a complex hydrology. And so this is one of those key projects, but the governor is very close to New Jersey Natural Gas. You know, the former head of it was a very good friend, is a very close friend of the governor's. And so, but again, it's one of those key projects that we're fighting, and we need the moratorium. The Penn East pipeline, of course, people here probably have heard about. It's a 110-mile long pipeline cutting from Pennsylvania through the Delaware Valley, through Lambertville, down to Ewing. We're in court. You know, excuse me, we're not in court. We've been fighting that for 7 years now almost. And what's in court is that the state of New Jersey did the right thing by denying them the use of state lands, and that's being challenged by Penn East, and that's going to the Supreme Court. And I know the Delaware Riverkeeper is going to file an amicus, and so will Sierra Club. But that pipeline goes right through where Washington's army marched, and will have a dramatic impact if it gets built. And we need the governor not only to come out against it, but to stop it. He did during the campaign, but he's been relatively silent since. And there are a couple of others that are on the bigger list I wanted to just mention briefly, which are the South Jersey gas pipeline through the Pinelands, where we also won a lawsuit where it was remanded back. And then we won again, and the Pinelands Commission was supposed to then rescind their approval of it. This was the pipeline that was supposed to go to the B.L. England power plant that Sierra Club's been fighting for 20 years that we finally won on. And it no longer had a valid reason for this pipeline to be built. It never had a valid reason, but it was approved. And the Pinelands Commission has refused to rescind that that approval. And now we have to go back to court against the Murphy administration to have the judge force New Jersey to carry out the judge's order from 9 months ago. And I find, again, the governor does a lot of talking on climate change and protecting natural resources. But these are the tests that are in front of the governor. And by the way, the Pinelands is one of the most, Steve mentioned before, one of the most vulnerable areas for forest fires, and to put pipelines through the Pinelands when they catch fire naturally, it's part of their ecosystem, is absolutely crazy. And, again, the governor had come out against fracking on the Delaware River, and we've been waiting now 3.5 years for the Delaware River Basin Commission to actually ban fracking in the Delaware River. So he says a lot of good things, but if he doesn't put a moratorium in place on fossil fuels, then a lot of his talk is hot air. And then I just have one more slide, and so we can get Tracy going. Or it's two more. It's about the Rapagno site down in Gibbstown, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about it because Tracy's going to do a lot more. Proposal for an LNG terminal on a very contaminated site to ship LNG out of the country. So New Jersey gets no benefit. We get the danger of it, of trucks and rail. Sierra Club and Delaware Riverkeeper suing on the rail changes at the federal level, and to allow it.
Jeff, I want to say what I know LNG like your name.
Okay, liquefied natural gas. I always say LNG, let's not go there, but never mind. It's dangerous. And if LNG, there's a real safety issue where it is explosive. I mean, a tanker of an ocean-going tanker full of LNG is more explosive than an atomic bomb. That they have up to 20. A truck or one of these trains could have up to a 2,500 square foot blast zone. The Trump administration says that LNG terminals should not be within 2 miles of any residence, and yet they're pushing one in New Jersey. And so they're explosive. And in Massachusetts, when the tankers go out, they close all the bridges, and the National Guard go on the bridges to make sure no one does anything. And they close Logan Airport as well. And yet this is going into one of the most densely populated parts of the country. Just go to the last slide, and then I'm gonna. And we've been working with our friends in Puerto Rico from the Sierra Club. Sorry, one more slide. And they're fighting it too. They've are going in front of FERC to try to fight it. The Sierra Club there is where one of the places where they want to ship the gas from New Jersey down there, and the people there don't want it. In fact, Puerto Rico just came out with a new energy master plan that called for them doing solar and battery backup and not to build 2 gas plants that this LNG was slated for. Our local members down there have been fighting this for a number of years, and because they don't want it, and neither does Ireland. And Ireland's another place where there's a lot of opposition against it because, again, people want to go green, and especially in Ireland, you want to go green. And so these are some of the major projects that are facing us. There are 11 total. But in order for us to get to 100% renewable, in order to get to climate reductions, we have to stop. When you're in a hole, you have to stop digging, and these projects need to be stopped. And we need a moratorium in place so that we have the time to move the state forward, to build that offshore wind, to build that solar. And I want to just, end with that. Because of the sense of climate urgency, because it's happening quicker, New Jersey needs to get to 100% renewable energy by 2035, like New York has done. New Jersey has to get to 0 carbon by 2050, not an 80% reduction with 10% sequestration. We got to get to 0. We cannot wait. The time is running out. We are heading into that tipping point. We need to reduce greenhouse gases 45% by 2030. And we need to electrify our transportation system to 100% by 2035 because the clock is ticking and we're running out of time. And this is really about us being able to change the future, that we see this calamity coming our way. We see my grandkids, future being very different than us, where they don't even know what a winter is, and that summer means it's too hot to go outside, and that our oceans are too warm and too polluted, and our bays to swim in. And so it is really up to us. So there is a real sense of urgency, and everything we've ever done in this state, when we have fought together and we have stood united, we've ended ocean dumping, we preserved the pinelands, we saved the highlands. Now we have to vote, we have to act like our future depends on it, because it does. Thank you.